So my name is Dan, and I'm going to talk to you about a nice light subject like communication and natural disasters. So just over a year ago, Superstorm Sandy hit the east coast of the United States, taking out power from millions of people, and taking down 25% of the communication towers. These were towers we rely upon for communication. The mega storm that just hit in the Philippines is further proof of what climate scientists have been saying about how these massive storms are going to continue to affect millions of people. So what's important to know about disasters is that for the first 72 hours, we have to rely on the people around us. This is because transportation corridors are blocked, and because humanitarian organizations need time to mobilize people. So we have to rely on the knowledge, the skills, the resources, and the networks of the people around us. In talking to first responders, Red Cross volunteers, survivors of Hurricane Sandy and Katrina, I heard a lot of challenges in disasters. But the challenge of communication and the importance of networks stood out more than anything else. So right after a disaster hits, people want to be able to communicate to their families, and they want to know what's happening around them. This is actually a picture from the Philippines, where as a journalist was going through an affected area, people wrote down messages on any scraps of paper they could find. Most of these messages just say, "I'm alive," with a destination number, really emphasizing that people want to get that message out. So if communication is an issue, how do people communicate now in a disaster? Well, I talked to Teresa, who was a survivor of Hurricane Sandy. She said right after the storm, she was outside on her sidewalk, trying to figure out who knew what information was where, trying to piece things together. She said she wasn't as bad off as others because she knew people who lived outside of it. So she had better access to better information and to better assistance. I also talked to Kevin, who was a volunteer in Hurricane Katrina. So he went down there to help with a pet shelter, and he was looking for other volunteers to help him. So he went to a centralized place like this and posted a flyer looking for people. We can imagine an environment like this. It's challenging to find the people you're looking for, or to get the message to the people that you want to get into. Kevin also talked about putting the word out. So this is kind of like a game of telephone, where you relay your message from one person to the next, and you hope the message that you sent is the message that's received. This suffers of all kinds of bottlenecks and all kinds of challenges. So these are how people communicate now. There's not great ways of sharing, there's not great ways of collaborating, and there's no way for people to build on that information. Each person has a piece of the information puzzle, but there's not a way for people to help themselves in a disaster, to put that together. I'd like to introduce Neighbor Share Spot as a concept to begin this conversation.
A major storm has struck. Millions are without power. Cell phone service is mostly disrupted. Neighborhoods will have to rely on themselves for the next few days. Seeing flooding in the streets, Jim sends a text message about the location into the local neighbor share point. Arriving at the neighbor share point, Jim is alerted that he is in range of the local Wi-Fi network. He uploads a message that will be sent to his family. Isa hasn't seen her friend Bernice since yesterday. Jim shows Isa how she could post a digital flyer to the SharePoint. While she is in that section, Isa looks to the Share Your Skills and Knowledge area, realizing that she knows the locations of some local seniors. Jim gets an alert from the SharePoint. He logs into the private leader panel and sees that a fire has just been reported next to the senior home that Isa marked. He sends an alert to registered volunteers to respond. Jim shares what has been learned with Bob, the first responder, about the situation on the ground. Bob downloads all the data to his mobile device so that he can take it with him into the field.
So as you can see, Neighborhood Share Spot, or Neighbor Share Spot, is a centralized place. It's a platform that allows people to share information when other technology and communication systems don't. The most important part of it is that it's a centralized place. Just as when we go to Disney World, we set rally points for our families to know where to go in a disaster. This will be this for a neighborhood. But it's also a tool that allows people to send and receive messages, to share the information that they know about the neighborhood, and to share the skills or resources that they have so others can take advantage of that. Finally, it's also a system that allows leaders like Jim to see patterns that are emerging over time so that he can respond to false rumors and other types of things like that. And it gives first responders a better sense of what's happening on the ground. I wanted to talk a little bit about the human-centered process that led to this concept. So we saw Isa in the video. She kind of reflects how a lot of survivors are in a state of shock. I talked to a first responder, a Red Cross volunteer, Shannon, and she told me that she's kind of like a personal assistant in disasters. That people often have access to the things they need, but because they're in such a state of shock, they're not able to access those things. Sociologists have been studying disasters for a long time, and they say that survivors are actually one of the greatest untapped potential resources to help themselves. Jim in the video kind of reflects how people take on different roles in disasters. A leader is one of those roles that people take on. They are looking for ways to consolidate information from different parts of the neighborhood, to put that together, to figure out how to assign tasks and how to identify patterns. But they don't have a great way of doing that. At the same time, on this bigger scale, first responders and humanitarian organizations are trying to figure out what's happening on the ground. Bob, a first responder that I talked to with over 20 years of experience, said that for any disaster, he needs to know three things. What do I have? What do I need? What are my resources? That's important because time is tissue. The longer it takes for him to respond, the more people are likely to suffer or possibly die. So building on all of these insights, all these different users, Neighbor Share Spot is primarily based on existing off-the-shelf technologies like routers and data modems that allows people to do things that they really need to do, which is to send information and to receive information. They can also utilize this space to learn and collaborate with others and to build on each other's information. And learning from insights that I took from how bees and termites share information in nature, the system also provides prompts. Just like Isa got a prompt about how she followed the locations of seniors and was able to mark that, this system also builds in subtle prompts to alert people about information they might not know they have. A vision for this system would require working with a local organization in one community to start off with. Identifying the right location that could accommodate large crowds, and then contextually designing the housing to fit whatever the disasters are in that particular area. Local leaders, rather than the entire community, would be trained on how to utilize this to provide guidance and identify patterns. But we would still have to create behaviors to get people to come to this place in a disaster. So utilizing the kiosk for other things like neighborhood movie nights might be one of those ways of generating that behavior. A longer term vision then would be one in which this is incorporated in every neighborhood of 10,000 people or more, giving them the tools they need to collaborate with themselves, but also between neighborhoods. And leveraging the existing technology of data modems, limited information can be sent out in advance to existing open source platforms like OpenStreetMaps and Google Person Finders, and to a dedicated Neighbor Share Spot site where loved ones can see what's happening on the ground and first responders can get a clearer picture of what's happening in their community. Neighbor Share Spot is a tool that allows people to help themselves in a disaster.